What you know about PE fitness? A more in-depth look on Dylan Gemelli's business. The #1 channel for performance enhancement. If you searching for muscle advance, can't learn it from a book or a pamphlet. Tune in for the answers, cause your body's too precious to take any chances.
All right, everybody. So I am ecstatic today to present to you Ray Lloyd, also known as Glacier, former WCW superstar. Welcome, Ray. It is a pleasure to have you, man.
Man, thank you, Dylan. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Truly, truly an honor to have you here. So, guys, I do want to say, if you don't know this about me, I have been an avid wrestling fan since I was 3 years old, was when my mom took me to my first house show in Iowa here, and I have been the biggest fan. So for me, this is just like a dream come true to have Ray on here. And so we're going to definitely touch a lot of bases here. But first, Ray is involved in a new movie that's going to be coming out that I really want him to talk about, because I've talked to him about it, but I don't have a ton of information, but it's super exciting. So Ray, I would just love to hear about this, and you kind of fill everybody in on what you have going on here.
Yeah. Well, once again, Dylan, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to us diving into a lot of good stuff here today.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, the movie itself, I'll kind of start with the title and then try to give a little quick kind of, overview of it. It's called The Unbreakable Bunch, and my best buddy Steve Luther Wilson, who we met at the WCW power plant back in '96, and became fast friends, and have remained great friends over the years, and over the years have become like family, really. And this was an idea he had, I would say probably, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, but about 10 years ago, we started getting really serious about, hey, look, why don't we try to, get a script written about this? And because, with anything that's like an idea for a movie, it's just going to be an idea until you get a script. It's not real until you get a script. And so finally, we decided to try to get a script for the story. And a good friend of ours, John Waterhouse, wrote the original draft of the script. And the premise of the movie is that we were big fans of the movies from the 60s and 70s, the ensemble cast movies, like, The Dirty Dozen, The Magnificent Seven. It's one of my all-time favorite movies ever.
Yep.
One that's an ensemble cast a lot of people don't think about is the original Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds. And, which is, and Luther and I were so fortunate, which we can get into much later. We both had a chance to not only meet Mr. Reynolds, but actually, take some acting classes with him, take a stunt seminar with him a whole weekend. Wow. But it was, we could do a whole episode of just that. But those ensemble movies, the Wild Bunch, which it is in the Unbreakable Bunch. Actually, you can see a little bit of the influence there with just the title of the movie. But what we wanted to make was a movie that there's never really been a movie that's really celebrated everything that's really good about professional wrestling. And, and just about everyone who's a wrestling fan, whether you're a real hardcore wrestling fan or you're just, the general fan who, just tunes in to watch, whether it's, Monday Night Raw or WCW Monday Nitro when we were, on back in the 90s. It's everybody that I've ever talked to became a wrestling fan because they had fun and they loved it, So, just joined by the Cat, my former tag team partner, Ernest Miller.
Welcome, Ernest. Man.
Well, what's up, guys? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I am beyond thrilled. I wasn't expecting this. I also have Ernest the Cat Miller joining us today. So thank you, Ernest, for joining us, man.
Hey, brother, thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
thank
you, Bill.
Absolutely.
And I do have to say, I make you guys look good.
I love it. I expected nothing less from you, man. I love it.
Oh.
So, Ernest, we just started talking about the movie that's coming out, and Ray was kind of getting into it. So we're kind of diving into that first, and then we're going to go over some more wrestling stuff I'm pretty intrigued to talk to you about. So thanks for being here, brother.
All right, my man. Let's go.
All right.
Kat, So I was just catching Dylan and the audience up on kind of really how the movie came about and what it was, how what really the story is and everything. And so just to kind of pick up where I left off is that we decided, wanted to make a movie that celebrated everything that's great about wrestling, that wrestling fans that caused them to fall in love with wrestling, and also we wanted to make a movie that still kind of preserved the magic of the wrestling business. There's a lot of stuff out there. You can go on the internet and learn anything you want about the pro wrestling business, right. and I get that. But I still think most fans at heart still like to be kind of transported to that world of, the magic of, what happens in the ring, not really knowing who's going to win, not knowing, what twist and turn is going to happen in the match, things like that. I mean, and so we wanted to make a movie that preserved that and celebrated that. And, the other thing that we realized that's never been done before is making a movie that had an ensemble cast of legendary pro wrestlers in it, kind of like the Magnificent Seven or Dirty Dozen. So that's what we set out to do, and we feel like we did a really good job with it. And so it's an action adventure film. There's plenty of pro wrestling in it. We also decided to write in a sci-fi twist to the movie. So and I can get into a little bit more later, but the story that the viewer sees from the very beginning is there's part of the story is a small Florida town. This alien presence lands, it starts to spread through this small Florida town. This veteran group of wrestlers come back together to go on this one last tour, and eventually on the day off they end up traveling through this small town, and that's where the two worlds collide. And we end up standing with the town to take back the town against the alien menace and the alien force. And at that point, it's Katie barred the door.
Yeah. That's awesome. Totally awesome. I love it. Well, it sounds like it's going to be amazing. And when it starts to come out and release, we got to get back on and talk about it and talk about the release and everything and kind of what went into it, because it stuff like this, people don't really hear a lot about, and right. They really intrigued on it. So both of you guys are in the movie then, correct?
Oh yeah. It's, Ernest, when we wrote the script, actually, we wrote it with, I think there was probably maybe at least 3 more wrestling characters in the movie. And finally, we just had to say, all right, there's just not enough time to tell that many stories in the movie and give everybody their moment, So we whittled it down to basically there's 6 main characters. And out of the 5 out of the 6 are all, it's myself, it's like I said, Steve Luther Wilson, my co-producing partner, of course, the Cat, and then Tonga Fafita, who the world knows as King Haku or Ming when we were in WCW.
Oh yeah,
and then the living legend Larry Zbyszko, and then the other role of the young up and coming star wrestler is played by an amazing young actor named Nicholas Logan, and he's been in a ton of great stuff, and he brought I think still saying that the rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, we were all prepared when we showed up, and the actors that we had, that are professional working actors that we cast in the movie, everybody really brought their A game, and it really made everybody's performance, I think, better. But Kat and I have a great story about when I first called him to ask him to please be in this movie. So, Kat, you want to tell him that?
Well, I've been in a few movies.
Yes.
So when Glacier came to me and said, "Hey, I want you in this movie," and I was like, "What kind of movie is it?" He said, "It's going to be a good friend movie about wrestlers." And I was like, "Not another wrestling movie," but he said, "No, this is about friends." So I said, "Okay, then I want to help you out." And I said, "But there's one more thing I need to ask of you. I need to know before I said yes." And he said, "What? When do I die in the movie? I don't want to be the first one to die in the horror movie." And I said, "Because they said the black man is the first one to die in the movie." So he assured me that I would go. He said, "Matter of fact, you're not going to die in the movie. You're going to go all the way to the end and maybe be in the next movie."
Yeah, some booty along the way. Yeah, and,
You got a deal.
Love it, Ernest. And that was a great thing too, Dylan, about is casting the people that we knew would come in and do a great job, personally and professionally, is because what Ernest brought to the role that wasn't really even written in the script. I mean, his character's name is Mac Brown. He actually, gave us a really good idea of what he felt like that character should be like. So he's kind of like a little bit more of a modern day cowboy type character. He has a cowboy hat and, the sleeveless kind of plaid shirt and the jeans and the cowboy boots. And it's a great look. And he really basically came up with that on his own.
Hey, where I get that from, we call it a redneck. I'm a big redneck cowboy, black cowboy. Yeah. That's what it is. Kung Fu cowboy.
That's what they call him in the movie, the Kung Fu cowboy.
Did you enjoy taking that role on? Because I mean, you're so charismatic. We all know that. I mean, did you really enjoy taking that role?
You know what, man? I forgot about it. We were making the movie, because it was so much fun just being around some of the best guys in the, to be around. So yeah. I really enjoyed it, man. And now you see I got my dark shades on, man. I'm telling you, I'm looking like a movie star right now.
Damn right.
Glacier, the creator of the movie star, man. I can't wait till my next role, Maybe I could play Sidney Poitier or some beautiful black actor or something like that,
Oh, man, I love it. So when do you anticipate this coming out? And do you know where we're going to be able to watch it yet? Or is that kind of still being done?
Yeah, we actually have a big Zoom call tomorrow with our film agent who is actually negotiating our distribution deal right now. So we're hoping, if everything can stay on schedule, we're hoping for a distribution date sometime around probably around the first of the year. So nice. Sometime maybe in January. The other good news is that we have signed an exclusive deal with Imagine Entertainment Theaters, which are in the Midwest, which are mainly Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, that area up there, to actually have a limited theatrical release exclusively with Imagine Entertainment Theaters. So we will be going into the theaters, which, for an independent movie like ours, typically that doesn't happen. And so we're really excited about that. We're hoping we can do that maybe even before the holidays. So obviously, as soon as I know for sure on that, you'll be one of the first people to know, Dylan, so we can get the word out.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is amazing. It's going to be awesome. And one of the things that you and I were talking about before and that I want to bring up, there's so much focus oftentimes on negative aspects of wrestling. And it's pissed me off over time. I'm sure you guys don't like it because, yeah, anything in life, there's a good and a bad, but the focus seems to always be on the bad. And there's so much good because, like we were talking about, and you see tremendous stories on people out there, and you guys have such good attitudes and such a positive vibe. And it pisses me off because guys like you that represent the good on things, everybody wants to talk about the negative, and then they want to make a name for themselves and talking negatively when you could make a name for yourself talking about the positive aspects. And that's why I wanted to have you guys on here, because I want to be around some positive people. I want to hear about the good parts of it, and I want to get both sides of the story. So I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to talk about that too.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Dylan, just in short, and I know we'll kind of come back around and maybe talk about the film a little bit at the end, is the one word when I'm asked, what if I could describe our movie in one word, it is camaraderie. In this movie, you have a group of guys who come together because, one, they're all passionate about the same thing, which is professional wrestling. These characters have all built great names. Obviously these guys are past their prime at this point, but they're also still very able to do it. And so it was really important to us that that's really the number one thing. I heard Road Dogg talk about this on his podcast recently, where he said, that used to be the number one thing that people, took from the wrestling business was the camaraderie. And that was our era too. So we wanted to make a movie that reminded people, you know what, this is one of the greatest things about our business is the fact that you bring a bunch of like-minded people together. I always say traveling in the same lane, going the same direction. And, great things happen when you do that. And so that's really what the movie's about. I mean, there's a whole, setup for it as far as the wrestling and the sci-fi and all that. But at the end of the day, it's all about the fact that these guys are really great friends. They come back together. The reason they come back together is to help a friend in need, it's to raise money for this friend. And there's kind of like a ticking clock. So they have to raise this money by a certain time. They all go back to work for this one promoter they swore they'd never work for again. So, but in spite of all the stuff that's thrown at them, they stay positive. they care about each other, and we show that in the movie. And we also wanted to show the human side of the guys, and to say, and when I say the human side, the good human side, and, and we wanted to show different sides of, with Tonga, he's legendary. Like I said, is King Haku back in his, WWE days, Ming when he was with us in WCW. And of course, there's the legendary stories about, him as being, certainly, in my opinion, the toughest guy I've ever known and ever met. We've heard the stories.
Yeah.
But, anybody who's ever met him for 5 minutes, and Ernest can attest to this too, is he's the kindest, most gentle, greatest family man you'll ever meet. Literally would lay down, in the road for anybody he cared about. And so we show that side of the wrestlers in the business in the movie too, because we felt like it was just way past due for those also to be seen. And so, we don't disappoint the audience. When Tonga throws down the movie, he still throws down, but just real quick, if everybody wants to keep up with the film, and just the updates on everything, it's the unbreakablebunchmovie.com. And once again, the unbreakablebunchmovie.com. And I got to give a big shout out to Robert McLaren, who is Diamond Dallas Page's web guy. He actually created the website for us. He's been a great friend of mine for a long time. And he's just so fully invested in this project with us. But if you ever seen any of Dallas's stuff, it's top notch. So Robert did a great job on our website. And so all the updates and the trailer, we dropped the teaser trailer. It's on there right now. And I'll make sure to get that to you. So maybe we can drop that at the end of the episode too. But when we release the full trailer, it'll be coming out pretty soon. It'll all go there first. So please check it out. The unbreakablebunchmovie.com.
And I'll guys watching, I will link that in the description. And when I post this on social, we'll link it so that people can get on it and check it out. So, Ernest, so before you got here, I was telling Ray and the audience, I've been watching my first show I went to. I was literally 3 years old. So I've got a ton of questions for you guys.
I was not wrestling then. If you were 3 years old, I was not wrestling. I don't know what the hell you trying to say. I'm not that old.
My point is how big of a fan I am, and I got unlimited questions for you guys. So
okay, all right, go ahead.
My first question for both of you, because I'm very intrigued, and I'm sure everybody is what was your reason? Because everybody's got a different reason why they wrestled. Some people it was just for the money. Some people it was because they didn't make it in football or what. What was you guys'?
Well, my reason for money. That's me. I wanted the money. I don't care. That's it. I wanted the money.
I want the honest answer. So fair enough, brother. I love it.
You know, when I got into wrestling, I had played a little pro football. I was a world kickboxing champion. But at that time, I was teaching karate. And we all know, the money was okay, but it wasn't the money I was making when I got into wrestling.
Sure.
And it just so happened I had a student with Eric Bischoff's son.
Oh.
Gary Bischoff was one of my students. And Nathan, I met Eric, and Eric knew what to say. He said, you'll be good in this business. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make you a very wealthy man. And, he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And he said, then you can come back once you finish wrestling. You can come back and give your life and do what you love doing for kids.
Yes.
Without worrying about bills, paying your bills. And he did exactly that, man. I got into the business and it kind of drew me in making money. But once I got into it, it's like I wanted to be good because I saw how my entertainment for some people really helped move people.
Yeah.
So I got into being a wrestler.
Oh, that's great, man. That's really awesome. What about you, Ray?
For the money. No, I mean, obviously, when they gets into, any kind of professional endeavor, of course you look at, hopefully can make a good living doing it. But,
Well, yeah.
I grew up in Brunswick, Georgia, which is about an hour, right on the Georgia-Florida line on the coast, about an hour north of Jacksonville, about an hour south of Savannah, Georgia. And my dad was a wrestling fan. So my twin brother and I, obviously, we got into it when we were very young. Like you said, we started going to shows when we were just, really young because my dad was into it, so we loved it. And then never ever, thought seriously that I would get into it on a professional level. Played football, college football at Valdosta State. And then luckily they were filming a wrestling show, local show there, and met a couple of guys. One, Rick Allen, who is a great friend of mine to this day. He wrestled at Sandy Beach and then Sunny Beach for several years in WWF. He introduced me to a guy named Fred Avery, who was a local wrestler in Valdosta. Fred offered to train me and one of my teammates. We were just finishing up our senior year of football, and Rob was reluctant at first, but eventually he convinced us to do it. And I can honestly say that it was still to this day probably the hardest ring I have ever been in. It was a ring I trained in. But there's something to be said about youth and inexperience. Just being in a ring was one of the coolest things I'd ever done. But yeah, I'll never forget the first day that we got in the ring. That we had to set it up in his backyard, and then we'd have to tear it down and put it kind of in his carport. He didn't even have a garage. We just put it in the carport, and then we'd put it back when we decided to train again. But I do remember, as much as he put us through the ring of the first day, I remember sitting on the edge of that ring after that first day, and it's just like it was 5 minutes ago. And I remember saying, like, man, and football had been my life up to that point, and martial arts as well. But everything kind of took a back seat on that day. I remember thinking, like, I don't know if I can be any good at this, but I have found what makes me come alive.
Yeah.
And I've been chasing that great feeling ever since, 35 years later.
Awesome. So I started watching really young, like I said, and I actually I know everybody kind of tends to put like 80s wrestling with WWF, but my dad used to watch Saturday nights NWA with me as well. And I got really into like when Sting was blonde haired Sting, and like the Steiner brothers and the Varsity Club. And like, I remember all of this shit. I was like 6, 7 years old. And so I really have like treated it almost like a school to me, like how much I was into it. So my question, I guess, to you guys was WCW where you first started, or did you start somewhere else? And what was it like for you coming up? Like, because a lot of people will have stories where they did indies and it took them forever. And some people just fucking come right in and they just roll, depending on the time and the opportunity presented and the character. So what was it like coming up for you guys, and how did you start? And what was it like for you? How difficult was the road?
Well, when I first got into it, they brought me in, and I knew nothing about wrestling. I never wanted to be a wrestler. So, but when Eric Bischoff hired me, we agreed for me to go through the power plant.
Okay.
So, they had this long thing. We're going to train you. We're going to teach you how to work in the ring. We're going to train you all, to do all this great business, to learn this business. So I was like, okay, I got about a year or so of just going to class. Man, let me tell you something. Within 2 months, I was on my first pay-per-view.
No way.
And 2 months I was on my first pay-per-view, and then they just threw me out there. And, so I had to learn on the big stage. And I still didn't realize, when I realized where I was at, one day we were sitting in the catering. Before a show, they'll bring in, they'll cater the meal and all this food, and they'll put it in a room. So I remember just going into the catering to eat. And I sat down at a table by myself. And I was looking around the room, and I looked to the left, I saw Scott Hall, Nash. Then I see Ric Flair walking through. Then I see Dusty Rhodes. Then I see Hulk Hogan. And these, like, what? I started to question myself, like, what the hell am I doing here? How did I get here? These are people I was watching on TV when I was in college, playing college football. But how did I get on this level? I didn't realize it. And then I looked up and I made eye contact with Scott Hall. He looked up at me. I looked at, I dropped my head because I didn't want him to see I was staring at him. But before I know it, he picked his plate up, his food up. He said, "Hey, can I sit down here with you?" And I said, "Yes, go ahead." And let me tell you something. He sat down with me, introduced himself to me, and told me, "You're going to do good in this business because we can see that you humble."
Right.
So, I mean, he gave me the rundown, man. That was the first guy I met, big name guy I met on the road. And he made it easy to start. Just by,
That's so cool.
Yeah, he was a cool dude, man. I don't know, people say things about Scott Hall, but to me, Scott Hall, and and I'm going to tell you this, even in the business of wrestling at that time, all food on the road. Anything I needed to know, I went to Eddie Guerrero. I went to Chris Benoit. I went to Glacier. Anything I needed to know or didn't know, I had so many good people around me who would explain it to me and break it down to me. I couldn't do nothing but help. I could only be successful because I had all the great people around me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You know what drives me crazy is that
Glacier.
like your story
Glacier.
there.
What's that?
He said what drive him crazy. I said Glacier.
Break it up a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
But what I really don't like is like people put misconceptions out on certain people, and Scott Hall is a prime example because he's always been one of my favorites from Razor Ramon days to Scott Hall days back to WWF. And you hear so many people say these stories about him and Nash and stuff, but then you give a story like that, which is the truth, as opposed to somebody going on hearsay. And I love hearing this, man, because it's like people don't realize that those guys were good guys. They did a lot to help people.
Oh,
man.
So
thank you for sharing that, man, because that was really, really cool to hear. And I love hearing that. Seriously.
But yeah. I just went to a show last weekend in New Jersey. It was a meet and greet, the 90s. And I got to see Tony Atlas, Kevin Nash, the Steiner brother, the Nasty Boys. Man, I'm telling you, just like a family reunion. It's like we see each other, we give each other hugs. Man, back then I thought, think about this. Whenever I got in the ring with someone before I got to wrestling, I wanted to knock the guy head off. I wanted to kill him in the ring. That was my thought process when I was fighting kickboxing and karate. Now you're in the ring with people you love, and you want to protect them, and you want to help them, and all you want to do is one of my first matches with Sting. Sting forgot a spot, I think. He missed out on the spot. He was late on the spot. And this guy, Sting, he apologized to me over and over. He said, "Ernest, I'm sorry I missed that spot." I said, "No, Sting was good." He said, "No, man, I just wanted us to have a great match for your first match with me." And you know what? Stuff like that, of course you're not going to have a perfect match. But just Sting, the legendary Sting, want you to have your first match with him be a great one. Man, that meant so much to my heart, man. And that's why today I love these guys.
That's amazing. That's just a testament to people that actually care. And it shows like the family type of atmosphere that's backstage. Cause I know it, cause I've heard it several times. So that's so cool. The greatest of the greats, because Sting is, let's face it, he's one of the most iconic wrestlers of all time and still that humble. That's so cool. Yeah. Yes. So cool to hear.
Yeah.
So I hope people hear that and understand like the real person that goes along with a lot of these guys, really, because it's something special.
Yes.
Thank you for
and it's a
sharing
testament
that.
too. It's a testament too, Dylan, that like Ernest. I mean, Ernest, like you said before, he came in. He was recruited into professional wrestling. In a way, kind of like Goldberg was.
Yeah.
And in the power plant, especially back then when Jody Hamilton, the original Masked Assassin, ran the power plant. There's legendary stories of the workouts at the power plant.
Yeah.
And the first time that Ernest and I ever met, it was the four of us got together. It was Bischoff, Ernest, Dallas, and myself. And I can tell you this, that the first time Ernest and I ever met, we clicked immediately. And now, almost 30 years later, we're closer now than we've always been close. But we're closer now, and I think the movie certainly added to that because we got to spend a lot of time together. But my point of saying all that is, the power plant had a standing rule that when you came into the power plant, it didn't matter who you were, it didn't matter what your status was, it didn't matter what you did before then, it didn't matter where you were on the pecking order at that moment. If you went to the power plant and you walked in that door, then you were coming there to train and to work hard. And the thing that impressed me so much about Cat was, he's one of the most charismatic people, from our generation of wrestling. But when he came in, here he is. He's a former NFL football player. He's already three-time world champion in martial arts. And he came in, and he had that charisma, but the charisma, it makes him so likable, But once he came in there and he got in the ring, and his work ethic, I'm telling you, like, Cat works hard, even to this day. I mean, he goes out and does sprints, and he works hard. He worked hard then, and I think that's one of the main things that bonded us right from the beginning. Is that same thing? Like I was never a guy who was super strong, super fast, never could jump that high, all that stuff. But I had a great attitude, and thankfully, because of my parents and some of my mentors, I had developed a great work ethic. And that's a lot of, when people come together and they have those things in common, there's typically, a chemistry there. And so that was a great thing. We worked hard, preparing to get ready for Ernest and I to debut, and he debuted as my tag partner. But just seeing his work ethic and his attitude and, his focus when he came in, coming from already being tremendously successful in other fields, athletic fields, and just starting basically from the beginning and saying, I want to start at the beginning, and I'm going to work as hard as you need me to work. And it was that every single day. Even after we went on the road and we were already making a name for ourselves at WCW, we still went to the power plant. And on the days there were days when we would land, and I'm talking about, we'd be on the road sometime for, a week and a half at a time, and we come home, and a lot of times we go straight from the airport to the power plant, get a workout in before the off day or two started, So and that's build that bond.
Well, Glacier, I hate to cut you off, but the reason I went to the power plant with you was because they were paying me. I just want to be honest. I didn't volunteer. I was getting paid. You guys
Nobody
didn't know
volunteers for the power plant, though.
I know it. I got paid now.
I love it, dude. I fucking love it. Another thing that I do is I train a lot of professional bodybuilders and athletes, but I always prefer. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person that's got the most notoriety. I prefer the person that works the hardest and wants it the most, and I find that working with those kind of people, and I'm sure you guys, it draws respect. It makes you want to work harder for that person or with that person. And the more respectful you are of others and the more that you show that you care, that makes everybody want to work with you, right? I mean,
yes, you're right. You're right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, okay, here's something I'm very interested in both of you guys, because you guys definitely have very notable characters. Like there's wrestlers that are really good wrestlers, but they don't have a character, or there's guys that, maybe have a great character, but aren't that great in the ring. But you guys pretty much had it all. So I guess my question is, do you guys come up with your own characters, or do they do it? Like, how do you spin on that, and what goes into that whole process?
Kat, you want to take a stab at it, and then I'll jump in after that?
Well, with my character, man, it was kind of funny. I did not know I had the ability to make people like me and laugh. Even when things are going wrong or things are hard, it's like I could always say something to make the locker room laugh. So one day I was in the locker room at Disco Inferno, and I forgot that Disco Inferno was part of the crew. So it was me, Kevin Nash, the whole NWO were telling me that they were going to figure out my karate move and they were going to do all this stuff to me. So we were going back and forth, and I was like, neither one of you chumps can ever touch me. I'm the greatest. And I just kept saying the Muhammad Ali stuff, if y'all beat me, I'll leave this locker room and never return. And everybody was laughing. I was a Muhammad Ali. So Disco left. I think Terry Taylor at that time was the head booker. And Terry came back and said, hey, Ernest, here we was in Chicago, full house. He said, here go the mic, go out and just talk. I said, say what? I said, man, I don't know if I can do this. Terry Taylor said, go out and talk. Do what you do in the locker room. They say you entertain in the locker room, go out and talk. So I was like, man, I had a mic in my hand. I heard the crowd. I didn't know what I was going to say. But once I got in front of the crowd and I started to talk and I started to interact with the crowd went crazy. Yes. They loved to be entertained. I said, oh, this crowd love for me to tell them to shut up and sit down. They love when I see a fat kid on the front row and say, sit down, fat kid. They love when I told a guy, told a lady to sit down and say, hey, guy, I'm sorry, ma'am. I thought you was a dude. They love that kind of stuff. So they loved it so much that every time I got the mic in my hand, mic near me, they wanted me to get on and interact with them like that. So Disco discovered me, my skills, but it was just natural, me having fun with my friends.
That's so awesome. Do you come up with your own stuff? Because I'm sure you have to just kind of freelance some of that. And I know they have scripts on things, but do you come up with a lot of that on your own too, or how does that kind of go? Yeah, you're back.
Okay, yeah, they will give me a script and tell me this is the story we want to tell.
Right.
But Kat, we want you to work in how you have said. I want you to be yourself. So it's kind of a team effort.
Yeah.
We all work together, man. And I'm telling you, sometimes I will go out on my own, but I got more when I was working with the team.
Yeah.
Because they had some talented bookers, man. I mean, Dusty Roll. Oh. Who else? Yeah, Dusty Roll and Mr. Wonderful. I know we had all kinds of bookers out there, man, that know how to make the business work for you.
Yes, cool. Was Kevin Sullivan a booker then at your time too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. Kevin was there.
Kevin.
That's what I thought.
Man, but Kevin was so mean, I was afraid of him. Kevin, he was mean, man. I was like, hey, they said, go to Kevin to get your storyline. I was like, can I go to somebody else, please?
That's awesome. What about you, Ray? Like with your character and everything, did you create that, or was that given to you, or what came about that?
Well, when we first started, which is, there were 5 kind of members of this whole Blood Runs Cold, thing. When we started, it was, of course, I became Glacier. Ernest basically was able to just be a little bit of a turned up volume of who he already was because of the name he had built, out there in the world already. And then Chris Canyon was Mortis. Brian Clark was Wrath, who Brian had just come off a great run in WWF as Adam Bomb.
Yep.
Brian and I started off together on the independent scene in Georgia together, but before Adam Bomb. And then Jim Mitchell, who in my opinion is still one of the greatest managers / talkers out there. He was James Vandenberg, and he was the one that managed them. So what Eric decided to do was, was we hired. I recommended a special effects company that was there in Atlanta. That I knew the guy who was the owner of that. So they hired that special effects company, which is a movie special effects company, to basically take everything, all these personas, as I like to call them, and from drawing board to finished product. And so luckily we were all very actively involved in all that in every step of the way. And so we got to be there for the entire evolution of just how each one of us would look, how we would act, how we would wrestle. So all that was a team effort, and where we really roundtable discussion day in and day out for months. For example, with Glacier, I think we started with over 150 names, and we just kept whittling it down, and finally that's what we settled on. So yeah, it was a process, and all that stuff. It's what I call, I tell every aspiring wrestler, it's what I call the non-glamorous work. It's the stuff no one's ever going to see, and they're never going to give you any credit for. But if you do it right, hopefully the finished product they'll appreciate, and they'll want to see more of it. So, but you got to do all that work with no guarantee that you're going to get any reaction or get the reaction you hope to. But that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
And we were all 100% invested. We really were.
That's awesome. Let me ask you guys both this. I'm really, really curious about this. And especially because Ernest was talking about when he first saw Scott Hall and everything. So this is a 2-part question. Was there ever anybody you got in the ring with that you were just like, what the fuck am I doing in here with this guy? Like, it overwhelmed you. And then is there somebody that you wanted to wrestle that you didn't get the opportunity that would have been like your dream match?
Hey, let me go at this first, Ray. And Ray, you go remember this, Ray. I think this was Ray and our first tag team match, and we were going against King Tonga and Barbarian. Right?
Oh shit!
Right.
And let me tell you, man, these guys were they were so mean and big looking. Man, I was scared. I looked at Ray and I was like, holy cow, but Ray he was cool, calm, and collective. So I said, okay. So I said, Ray, before the match, you want to oil yourself up and look good for the camera. So I said, Ray, do you have any kind of lotion in the thing? He said, I just got this. So I started applying the lotion to my arm, and I smelled the lotion, and it smelled like strawberry and fruit. So I looked at Ray. I was like, Ray, this smells like strawberry. He said, yeah, it's strawberry. I said, man, look, we getting in the ring with D2. We getting in the ring with D2 big old guys. They going to eat us alive.
Oh, shit. That is classic, dude.
But when we got in the ring with these guys, man, I'm telling you, you couldn't hardly feel anything. They're so professional in the ring. Yeah. And Tonga, man, they were so strong. Just to be in the ring with them, I came from the real kickboxing karate world where you feel a man's power when he throw a hard punch. But just being around these guys and being close to their movement, you can feel the power that they really have.
Oh, yeah.
If they wanted to do something.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, my number one guy that I really wanted to work with was the Dragon.
Oh, yes. Jeez.
Yes. I would love to work with him.
That's a guy that people that are like wrestling historians, when you've watched him, and you can go back and watch him now, he is so smooth and incredible. He never has a bad match. Literally, never.
Yes.
I was just watching the other night some like 1985, 86 like WWF house shows, and he was just incredible back then. I mean, it was just insane. That's a good one that you brought up.
Yeah.
And the reason I would like to work with somebody like that, because I was so athletic that I could throw kicks from all different angles. So I said it would be good to be able to throw a kick and let him make you look good, because he was able to sell so much.
Oh, man.
So, that's Chris Canyon was like that.
Yeah.
Chris Canyon, he was like, Ernest, throw the kick here. And I said, I'll figure out how to get there. He said, once you get to this spot, I'll make your kick look. Man, Chris made me look like $1 million out there with kicks, man.
Yeah.
He was so. but he worked his butt off in that power plant too.
I don't think he got enough credit, honestly, because he really had some really good matches over the years that I watched. And what you're saying, I noticed it. Like, he could make anybody look good, really good,
Yes.
really good.
Yeah.
What about
And
you,
a lot
Ray?
of people don't realize too how big Chris was. Chris was about 6'4", about 260.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a big guy.
Yes.
And he was so smooth. And I always say, before answering that question, Dylan, one thing I wanted to say as a credit to Ernest and to Brian and to Canyon was when Ernest debuted, he debuted on one of the pay-per-views we had in Carolina, and he wasn't supposed to debut yet. And what happened was we were at the power plant training. I think it was like that Wednesday before the pay-per-view. I was practicing actually a Luthez press off the second rope. I jumped in, and somehow my ankle landed underneath me, and I actually fractured my foot, ankle right there, and I had to put a cast on. So this is going to be my second pay-per-view. And so and Ernest was not set to debut yet. We were going to kind of hold off a little bit. And then all of a sudden, here I am. I can't wrestle a match, but I'm not going to miss the second pay-per-view, of my career.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a lot more of that story that we can get into maybe on another time. But basically what we all decided as a team was, okay, well, I could go out there and I can, Kenny and I could do some stuff where I'm not moving a lot. We can sell that, he's working on my knee and stuff. And then we'll have Ernest, what happened was Ernest came out of the crowd and street clothes. He came in the ring. And if you go back and watch the clip of it, the kicks he threw and the way that Chris Canyon and Wrath and Mortis and Wrath, did the bumps they took for it was amazing. I mean, they literally it looked like he killed him. And, and it was, and I still think it's the best unannounced debut of anybody in professional wrestling ever. I still believe it. I mean, if you go back and watch it, nobody expected it. Nobody knew anything about it. It just, and it was, sometimes when you're forced to do something that you weren't planning on doing, you find a way to, make chicken salad.
Right.
But yeah, as far as answering the question about what Ernest just answered, for me, there were two people that when I got in the ring and I looked across the ring, I was like, holy cow, how did I get here? Was my Tommy Wildfire Rich, who was great, held the NWA title for a brief period, but was great in the Southeast especially. And I had met Tommy. He started working with me some, and he actually it was the summer of '89. He actually orchestrated to where I could actually work with. It was still NWA, just became WCW. On the start on the summer, kind of tour, and I was basically, a faceless opponent, and I went out there and it was Albany, Georgia, in the Albany Civic Center, which is a big arena, and it was a house show, and I was matched up against Butch Reed.
Oh wow!
And anybody ever saw Butch Reed in his prime, especially, man, he was a pretty imposing character, and I think he may be a long lost family member of Ernest's because they sound a lot alike, got the same charisma, oh yeah, and so I was terrified because I went out there and and all I'd ever known is watching Butch Reed run through people, and this is back when he would use the off the top rope, the flying shoulder tackle, and so we go through the match. I somehow survived the match, and then I get hit with the shoulder tackle, and all of a sudden I realize my shoulder's still there and everything, and it was a physical match, but I remember sitting in the locker room after the match thinking, like, holy cow, like that's what it's like to work somebody at the top level, that goes out there, it is 100% believable, but allows me to kind of live to fight another day, and so that was my first taste of, wow, this is what it's like to work with a real pro in this prime, a real star in this prime. And then that was on a Sunday night. A few days later, I went to, which now is world famous, the Center Stage in Atlanta, where we taped Saturday Night TV all those years. And this was, I think, a Tuesday or Wednesday night. It was a few days later. And I look on the rundown of the card, and I matched up against one match that night I think we had 2 or 3 taping, the shows, and I was matched up against the Great Muda. And this is when he was first making his first run but everybody already knew of him because of his reputation that had already been built. So I ended up having a great match with Muda that night. Gary Hart, you want to talk about pressure? Gary Hart is his manager. Tommy Young's legendary referee in the match. Michael P.S. Hayes and Jim Ross on commentary.
Wow.
and Russ and Muda, and so I was. But once again, I came through it okay. And that those 2 matches were like, holy cow, how did I get here? And but it allowed me to prove to myself, you know what, I can. I'm not ready yet, but I got a taste of what it's like to be at this level, and I know what I need to shoot for now. So
Glacier, my next big match was with Andre the Giant. No. when I tried to sweep his leg, he picked me up by the hair and threw me into the front row. All right. I'm lying. I wasn't even around when Andre was just. I just wanted to use a big name. Throw around the name.
Yeah, but I mean, and once again, that's someone. Andre's one of the people that, one of the few people that I never really got to meet, and obviously I would have loved to, just because.
Yeah.
But the great thing that has come out of it is getting to be such great friends with Tonga. Tonga was tag team partners. They won the world tag team titles together. So I've gotten the chance to hear as we're telling you firsthand stories. I still get to hear firsthand stories from Tonga about Andre, which is pretty darn cool.
Amazing.
But yeah, my one I would have loved to have tagged with Steamboat. That's one of the things I would have loved to have tagged with. Certainly loved to have worked with him. But I think if me and Ernest and Steamboat could have had a 6-man tag, I could have died a happy man after that match. But if there's one person who I would have loved to have wrestled and never got the chance to, even though we were there together in WCW all these years, those years that we were there, those 5 years together, would have been fun. Yeah. Just because it's Ric Flair, and to have had a match with Flair and be able to be in that ring and experience that level of just world class ability and just that persona, and just feel the magic of the arena in the same ring with Flair would have been really great.
Cool. I want to say something to people watching. So you brought up Great Muda, and because Muda was more in Japan, one of my favorite times was like in that late 80s, early 90s when he was there. And Starrcade 89 is still one of my favorite pay-per-views ever. The Sting, Luger, Muda, Flair, thing. But if you have never watched Great Muda, go back and pull some YouTube clips or get on somewhere and find it, because this fucking guy is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing to watch.
Hey, let me tell you, I wrestled a Great Muda and got a win. And let me tell you, I got so many death threats. That you would not believe it. We wrestled on the pay-per-view, and they put me over on him. And I'm telling you right now, people were angry that they put me over on him.
I bet. Oh, man.
Yeah.
He was amazing. And you know what else, Ray, when you said Butch Reed. So I remember watching Butch Reed in the 80s. He was the natural Butch Reed. And I was too young, and I didn't realize when he was Doom till they took the mask off, and I was fucking scared of Doom when I watched him. I was like, these fuckers are me.
We all were.
Man, Butch Reed had a lot of talent, and he did well, but I think he should have done even more than he got.
He could have done even more.
But there was so much talent back then; it's hard to spread it around, and that's always a problem.
But he was.
I never got to work with Butch Reed, but Ernest Allison, my whole career, he would tell me, he said, "You just like Butch Reed. You remind me of Butch Reed."
Really?
I never met him. Yeah.
That's a big compliment. A big compliment.
Yeah.
So,
but he's one of those guys that I wasn't around him a lot really after that. But every time I was around him, you felt like you were around the star. Yeah. He carried himself, and he had that natural charisma. He had that natural air of confidence about him that when he walked into the room, like, I don't care if anybody knew he was a wrestler or not. The people that were in the room, if he walked into a restaurant, you knew he was somebody. You just knew he was somebody. And very few people have that ability to be that kind of person without looking like they're trying to be, that kind of person. He could just walk in, and he had he just had that watch. You wanted to watch him. I mean, he was just, he looked
I
like
agree.
a star.
Here's a good question I got for you. So for you guys, what was your favorite pay-per-view to be a part of, and what was your least favorite? Because I always feel like Starrcade was like your WrestleMania, right? And Great American Bash was a big one, and Bash at the Beach were big ones. But what was the one? What were the one that you just were like, man, I'm up for this? And what one did you maybe not care for as much?
I like the one in San Francisco. What was at the Cow Palace? I forgot what pay-per-view it was, but it was the one that I had James Brown to come in on.
Man, I'm trying to remember which one that was. I don't know why I'm drawing.
Yeah.
It was at the Cow Palace. I forgot which one it was myself, because I was new to the business. But that was my best pay-per-view there. And then the one with Glacier, of course. And the one I didn't like was the one we had in Vegas, Halloween Havoc.
Right. Okay. All right. To me, Halloween Havoc 98 was one of the biggest disappointments ever. That Hogan Warrior main event was brutal to watch, and it just was not a good pay-per-view for what it should have been. But I guess that's neither here nor there. So, yeah.
Hey, that show you how new I was to the business.
Oh shit! I love it.
But go ahead, Ernest. No, I was just saying, to that point is, we used to have a saying in wrestling that we've been to every major city in the country and haven't seen any of it, because the schedule back then, we were just going and going and going. And there's times like with Ernest, like when someone says, hey, do you remember, this pay-per-view? And I'd say, well, what was the name of it? Because, I mean, and it was just like, we were just, the grind was like, okay, we got to be here this day. We got to be here this day. And I wish, that's one thing I wish, if there's one regret that I have, and I really admire Jericho for a lot of things, but Chris Jericho, always kept a journal. And if there's one thing that I wish I would have done was I would just kept some kind of a journal, but when you're living, and if you're just trying to make sure you're a good, asset to the team, you show up, you do your job. That's what you're focused on. A lot of times, back then I didn't think about recording it,
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I believe, Ernest, I think that pay-per-view was Super Brawl where you were with James Brown. Does that sound right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That's what I thought.
There's a saying that we used to have, in the wrestling business. We used to say, like, you the towns by the arenas that you're in. You get to the city and you go to the arena and you go, okay, now I know where I am. This is so-and-so arena.
What did you guys think of Road Wild and the Sturgis with all the bikers and all that shit? Was that cool or not cool? What did you think about that?
Correct. Cat, because ironically, yeah. Go ahead, Cat. No, I gotta. Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's heat. I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, ironically, I never was on one of the Road Wild
wow.
games. So, yeah. But once I heard the first time about the fact that you had to travel, I don't know, I forget where the guys were flying to, but it was still like a drive. I don't know, a few hour drive out there. Yeah, so it was one of those where I wasn't griping too much about not being on that because of the drive, But to kind of circle back, my absolute favorite match, and I've said this, for years and years, my absolute favorite match that I ever did in my entire career was when Ernest and I tagged together against Mortis and Wrath at Bash at the Beach '97, right. And it was at Daytona. We actually, there's a few spots. Yeah, there's a few spots you want on the pay-per-view, and one of them is that first match is a great spot to be on because it's a very pivotal match. It sets the tone for the rest of the pay-per-view, and hopefully your audience is they're about as geared up as they're going to be, because they're ready to see some action, and so it's a great spot to be on a pay-per-view. And so we kicked off that pay-per-view and in Daytona, the Ocean Center in Daytona, and it was just one of those matches. And as far as when I started, my career, I spent several years on the independent circuit. When I got my deal offered, with WCW, I was right at about 9 years. I had been in the business about 9 years, so I had kind of, this journey was starting to. There was times when I didn't know if it was ever going to happen, But that point of that match, that's the best match I've had in my entire career, where everything just clicked. And once again, it's a testament to how great of an athlete Ernest was and how coachable he was. That he was still pretty darn new at that point. And granted, you had me and Kenny and Brian and really, Vandenberg, who was a great asset outside the ring, the stuff that he was doing. But we were able to kind of take what we knew Ernest, we got him to where he was at that point, which I think was light speed as far as what he learned in that short period of time, and then able to accentuate his strengths in that match. And, and the stuff that he wasn't a seasoned yet, we could kind of work around that, and, but if you go back and ever watch that match, that audience was so into that match. And there was never really a time where we really slowed down, but it was a match where I always say, I'm okay with a match, going at a fast pace, as long as everything makes sense. What I'm not okay with is a match that's it just looks like stuff's just thrown against the wall and it has no rhyme or reason to it. In that match, everything we did, I feel like I can firmly say made sense. It was a reason why we were doing everything, and it led to something else and led to something else. And so the story that was told in that match is a story that was very easy to follow, but very much had great peaks and valleys. Everybody had their moment in that match, and then and it was a great kind of build up to the finish, and Mortis ended up kicking me with a freaking chain and right in the chest. But other than that, I loved about every other part of the match except that. So.
I don't think a lot of people realize the importance of the first match on a pay-per-view. I think everybody focuses so much on the main event, but the first match is the most impactful match on the whole pay-per-view because it sets the tone, and it's really going to judge how the audience is going to engage for the whole thing, because they could be totally dead if the first match is a dud. So that's a big responsibility to put. That's a testament to you guys on how much belief was in you to put you on first.
Right, and we had Jericho and Ultimo Dragon following us, so we knew we had to set because so it was that was one of those I'll never forget. They had put Paul Orndorff with us as kind of our mentor for that first year, for Paul just share his wisdom with us about what he felt was working, what he felt wasn't working, what needed to be tweaked. And so I'll never, ever forget what I think for me personally was, and I don't know if you remember this, Kat, or not, but every time we would do a match, everything was coming together, but Paul would always say, it's something missing. I'm not sure what it is. I'll figure it out, but just give me something. But there's just that little something missing, and I'll never forget. where the war room was, and where we had to go out to, to get to, what most people call the gorilla position, on deck circle. They had a bunch of pipe and drape that came around. I mean, it was a pretty good walk over from one to the other. And I'll never forget when we came backstage after that match. As soon as we walked back and we turned to go down the kind of pipe and drape hallway, Orndorff was making a beeline towards us, and all he was doing was going, "That's it, that's it, that's it." And man, that was just like, yeah. I mean, you see someone of his caliber at that point in our career, and you're getting that kind of reaction from someone. You're getting the approval of someone who has been to the mountaintop, and it was just it was invaluable. It was just one of the coolest things in the world. Yeah, man.
Yeah. I would absolutely love having you back. I really appreciate the time. I knew it was going to be fun, but it was more fun than I expected. So thank you, man. Really, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I will, Cap. Thank you, man. See you, bud. Have a good trip, bro.
Awesome, man. Well, that was cool. That was awesome to have him on here, man. That was fun. So,
yeah. And he's like that all the time.
I already knew what was coming. It was even better than I thought. So, you know what I wanted to ask you, Ray? Because I know I have my opinion on this, and I'm very interested from the perspective of somebody that was around it, as opposed to just me as a viewer. Who do you feel was very underutilized, underrated, or maybe didn't get the shine that they maybe should have in WCW? I'm very curious as to your input on what you saw and the talent, because it's different under your eyes than mine or somebody just watching, because you're there. So what did you feel? Yeah. Who were some underrated guys?
Well, the first one that I always go to was Chris Kanyon. I really do believe it. And Chris, I'll always say Chris had a great run. And as we broke off from, doing, he kind of broke off from being Mortis, and then, became more of Chris Kanyon. He came up from under that. And then, of course, him and Dallas and Bam Bam, they kind of did that triad thing together. So, I mean, we went to WWE, and they did some stuff with him at WWE. So, I mean, if you had to sit there and say, okay, did he have a good, solid career? Yeah. Absolutely. But I feel like because, he was just, I mean, I know I was super, super committed to this business during that time. I mean, it was, of course you have to be. I mean, that was our, not only was it was our, career, our job, it was our passion. So it wasn't necessarily, I always say, the people, this is a very popular quote out there that, Kanyon and I used to laugh about this, is that people say, do something you love, and you find something you love, you never have to work a day in your life. And I've never really subscribed to that philosophy. My philosophy is, you find something you love and you make a living doing it, you're going to work harder than you ever worked in your life if you want to be successful at it. The difference is you don't mind doing the work because you love what you're doing, and there's a big difference there, but you're going to have to do the work. That's what frustrates me about that saying. People say, find something you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. I'm like, no, that's not been my experience. My experience is you're still going to have to work hard and do the work, as Cody always says, but it's, you don't mind the work, you don't mind the grind, because it's something that you wake up every day and you can't wait to go do. And man, Chris Kanyon, I mean, he loved this business like no one I've ever seen. He was so super dedicated to it. But also, it was fun to be around. We had our group of friends that we called the FOP, the Friends of Paige. And there was a bunch of guys at Dallas actually, he went to bat for to help, us get a contract. And my number one favorite quote, which is something that I would love to talk more in detail about, as we go on, is maybe on part 2 of this or whatever. My athletic trainer in college was a gentleman named Jim Madalino. He's now gone on. He's the head of all the sports medicine at University of Kentucky over all the sports programs there. But he was just wise beyond his years way back then, because he was, he seemed like he was 40 years old, but I think he was only about in his mid-20s back there. But here I was, an 18, 19-year-old kid, and he ran his athletic training room like a field general, and when you walked in there, you knew he was boss. And he had a great saying. He was taping my ankle one day, and he said, Ray said that, it's a fiery, little Italian guy. And he said, Ray, he said, you ever heard this saying, he says, everybody's heard that saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I said, yeah, it's absolutely. He goes, well, there's a part of that I think makes it even more true. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who's willing to say they know you. Who's willing to put their name and their reputation on the line. Good. So that might give you an opportunity and open the door. And that's really what Paige did for me. I mean, I got to know Paige when I moved to Atlanta in 1990 to pursue this dream of wrestling. And it didn't happen until January of 96. So even though I knew Paige early on, it was still getting to know him, getting to trust him trust me, him see my work ethic, him see my commitment, him see my drive to where, going and putting, his name and reputation on the line to Ernest and to WCW. I mean, with Eric, to give me an opportunity. He did the same thing for Canyon. He did the same thing for a lot of guys. And so that group of guys, we always, affectionately call ourselves the FOP, Page. But I would say, Chris is the first one that comes to mind. I feel like if they ever, whatever responsibility they would have given Chris, I really believe he could have run with it. And I feel like, he did. He looked the part. Like I said, he was tall. His frame matched his size as far as, but he didn't look like he was 260. I mean, but he was one of those guys, and Paige is the same way. When you stand up next to him, you're like, man, he's bigger than I thought he was. He's bigger than, I thought he would be able to see him on TV. And Paige is the same way. A lot of people don't realize Paige is a legitimate 6'5". And he's super lean now because of, just, the DDP yoga and all that. But people, more of my friends, when they met Dallas, would be like, holy cow, he's bigger than I thought. I was like, yeah. And the Canyon was a lot the same way. He was because he was so fluid and he was so athletic. And if you saw him outside the ring, the way he just walked and stuff, he didn't necessarily, move like a stereotypical, world-class athlete, but he really was in the ring. I mean, that guy could do so. We nicknamed him the innovator of offense, because if we were down at the power plant and we were brainstorming stuff, he could just come up with stuff that it was, and it's, I mean, even in the 90s, 96 through 01, when we were there, I mean, it was still hard to come up with something new, even at that point. Oh, yeah. and so my hat's off to people today who come up with something really new and innovative, because it's hard. I mean, in our business, it's hard to do something that hasn't been done yet. And he was just very, very good at putting pieces together. If you gave him this piece and you needed to somehow do this to get here, he was the guy you went to, because he could somehow connect the dots and come up 9 times out of 10. He could come up with something that not only would work, but it would work for whoever needed. There's certain things that I could do that that Billy Kidman could do that I couldn't do. And so he could come up with stuff that could be tailored to, say, something Kidman needed to be able to do. And he was. But I always leave with saying he had a great career. But I do feel like if they would have wanted to push him more, he definitely could have handled it, and I think he definitely would have thrived.
So I was talking to a good friend of mine, Andrew, actually about this yesterday, and he brought up to me, because we were talking about who should have ended Goldberg's streak, and I always thought it should have been Sting. And he was saying that he felt like it should have been Wrath, Adam Bomb, and Wrath was one of those guys that probably had way more talent than he was utilized in both WWF and WCW. I think more so in WCW. That probably could have been. But you know who? This is going to sound crazy because of what he became. And you talked about reinventing yourself. Nobody's reinvented themselves more than Chris Jericho has this long. They just haven't. And I felt like it's crazy to say he was underrated because of what he became, but I felt like in WCW, he was underutilized and underrated, and a lot of the cruiserweights were. But for what he could have been, and I understand, look, you got so many of these guys at the top level that were there forever, but I think Jericho should have been up there instead of treated as a cruiserweight for most of his time there. Honestly, that's my view on it, but
No, and Jericho, I believe, could have handled it at that point. I mean, he was still, quite young in his, quite early in his career, but Jericho just, he's always, he's always had that it factor. I mean, he's, and I think he's always had it, but he's certainly learned how to cultivate it even more, towards our industry. He learned, I mean, and he was like Canyon and like myself. I mean, he was a true student of the game. I mean, he dove in 100%. When he wasn't wrestling and when he wasn't training, he was studying. Whether it was reading about it or watching. Back when we were, in our time, you had to trade tapes. You had to trade VHS tapes. And, but it's yeah, I mean, I used to, during my WCW era, this is something that's really funny. I look back now, and because I try to explain to people, that, the aspiring wrestlers today is like, it's just like, it's not just, specific to wrestling. It's whatever. If you want to be the best at whatever you're trying to do, or if you want to be considered someone who's really working to be towards being the best, and you want to be able to do the things that the other people are not really willing to do. And I always say successful people just do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. Not that they can't do it. They're just not willing to do it. And one of the things I had, is a guy who I just met in the wrestling business. I forget how we ever met. He's a wrestling fan. He's still a friend of mine to this day, named Gary Graham. And he lived, I think, somewhere in Ohio. But we started talking on the phone, and this is right before I signed with WCW. But then all during my WCW years, Gary was the guy he somehow could get all the matches from all over the place. I don't know to this day how he did it, but he would, and I would say, hey, I need a tape on so-and-so. And he would put together matches of just whoever. And like, for example, Arn as a tag wrestler, Arn as a singles wrestler was great, but as a tag team wrestler, Arn and Tully, I remember that being one of the ones I said, hey, I need a tape of just Arn and Tully tagging. So, because I wanted to be able to, I wanted to show Canyon and Brian, like, okay, let's do some of this stuff, man. And, if me and Ernest are going to be up against you guys a lot, let's use a lot of this, and I didn't want to try to run down 20 different tapes. So Gary would put those, and he would just, for $20, he'd mail me the tape, I get it in the mail, and I'd throw it by VCR and watch it. And, but that was, we didn't have YouTube and stuff like that back then. So you had to be willing to, at least in my opinion, make that extra effort to be able to find that stuff. And, it meant a lot to me that someone like Gary would take the time to do that. And I was happy. To me, I was getting it for a steal to give him $20 to sit down and put all that stuff together, But there were a lot of times he'd just send me a tape and be like, hey, don't worry about it, But Jericho, like I said, kept the journal, which I thought was amazing. I really wish that's the one thing I wish I would have done. But he just, Jericho always had that. He just had that, he was so much fun to be around. Yeah. He still is. He still has what, in my opinion, the thing I love about Jericho, I still see it to this day. He still just has kind of that childlike wonder. He's just having a great time, man. But he does his homework. Obviously, he does tons and tons of homework. He studies this business. He studies how to reinvent himself. And every time he's reinvented himself, I look at it like not necessarily reinventing himself. He's just peeled back another layer that was of his personality that's always been there. He just decided, okay, at this time, it's time to show this, and it's time to show this. And he's always been incredibly comfortable with those layers. So it's very easy to believe it and buy it.
My favorite he ever did was when he was coming out and doing the list. I could not take it. I literally would laugh every single time he pulled the pen out and added somebody on the list. I couldn't fucking take it, man. I don't know why, but that one just got me. I loved it so much. But
oh yeah, he did. The stuff with Ralphus. I don't know if you've ever heard him tell the story about Ralphus. About how he just was like, well, I can kind of just, he kind of made it where I just go, if I go out there and do it, they're not probably going to say anything. And so, that's the whole story. And if no one, a lot of people remember, I'm sure, Ralphus was the guy that he had as his, kind of makeshift bodyguard. And, but there's a video on YouTube. If you just research it, it's him doing one of his one-man shows where he explains how that all came together, which is really hilarious. And very par for the course for WCW back in the day.
Oh yes. I got a couple more questions for you, and we got a lot for part two. There's no way I can get through, but there's two I definitely want to kind of get to. I'm curious, what was it like for you and kind of for everybody when you knew WCW was kind of not going to make it, and then what was it like when it when it actually was sold? Was it like something that just happened? You went there and it was like, hey, this is going on tonight, or was it something that you knew ahead of time? And then what was your reaction, or what was kind of the reaction there? Because it was wild, man. I mean, it just like fucking happened, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And for me personally, this is the crazy thing about the wrestling business, because at that top level, you know, we're all independent contractors. You know, you're not employees. You're not an employee of the company. So you're not hired as an employee. You're contracted to work. And so, you know, in the way that, unless you were a Hogan or a Macho Man, or, you know, of that level where you really were able to have a lot of say so about, you know, the terms of your contract, you know, a lot of the guys, you know, especially like in my position, which was more that mid-card, you had your agent who would fight for you as best he could for the contracts. But a lot of the contracts, you know, they had this, you know, kind of 90-day clause, and like you could get reevaluated every 90 days. And, you know, if you signed a 3-year deal, it's like, you know, you could be let go really at any time. And it was like, so there was this part of, you know, always kind of walking on eggshells, like, you know, I hope I don't make somebody mad to the point to where they, you know, and make it personal and they go in and I get ousted. You know, they cut my contract, which could happen at any time, because there's a lot of egos in our business. There's, there's a lot of, personal stuff that does transpire, and there's people of power who can use that against people, you know, that if they wanted to, and that's certainly not exclusive to the wrestling business, but so, you know, there was that. You know, always, and every time there was a changeover of the booking committee, which was pretty regular at one point, especially near the end with WCW. So you were always like, okay, well, you know, the people that come in on this committee, you know, that are going to be in charge of the booking, you know, do they like me personally, or do they? And it really, it's not so much about whether they like you personally. If you can draw money, it doesn't, you know, and you know, as long as they'll find a way to put up with you no matter who you are, as long as you can draw money. Yeah. So that's the main thing. But you know, I just think it's always better if you can be someone who can get along, and be, you know, someone who's you know, at least somebody that's, you know, people enjoy working with, and you can also be somebody that brings value to the product. To me, that's a win-win, you know? So, that's always what I tried to be. But I remember, and you know, that last year or so, and my contract actually, because I signed a second one that was, I believe, a 2-year deal, and it had just coming to an end, right around the end of 2000. So, and then I had kind of, you know, I think it was the last 3 months. So it would have been right around the end of the year of that 2000. And so I was negotiating, trying to get a new contract. But I had been, you know, told verbally, okay, well, we'll probably still use you, but it might just be on a per match basis right now. So I was kind of waiting to, and I had been actually, told, you know, that by the people that were power, that and Orndorff had really campaigned for me to become a coach at the power plant. And that's really where, at that point in my career, I really wanted to go, was to maybe, because what I felt like we needed was, you know, someone who could be, if you're at least at the power plant, you're one step closer to the office, to the people in the office. And what I felt was needed, I felt was a big problem with WCW, was there was always a loss of communication between the office people and the wrestlers, because the wrestlers always felt like they didn't really have a lot of people in the office that walked in their shoes, so to speak, you know, so they didn't really understand, you know, that, okay, you've been on the road for 10 days at a time, and all of a sudden they book you for an appearance, you know, on the next day when you're supposed to be flying home, you know? So it's like, you know, so I felt like, you know, if I could get in at that, and Paul was helping me work towards that, but at that end, every week you start to hear, you know, like it seemed like that last year, oh, well, you know, this is going to happen. They're going to close us down. We're going to get bought out by so-and-so. So after a while, it's like, you know, crying wolf or the sky has fallen. After a while, you're just like, all right, what will be, will be. I'm just going to ride this out, you know? And, but I do remember, it's funny, Dylan, I specifically remember, and here's the funny thing. I don't even remember who actually called me. I think it was either maybe Canyon or Disco, but because, like I said, that was kind of our group. But I remember getting that call that you know, hey, you know, it's done. It's, you know, it got sold. And of course, you know, and then at the beginning, you know, of course they said, you know, Vince had bought it, but back then, like I said, this was still kind of early days of the internet. You weren't really sure if you could buy that or not. And so we got an official word, but I do remember. I remember pulling over and, into a parking lot, into a parking space. And I remember almost immediately, and this was not a conscious thing at first, I just remember like this huge weight being lifted off of me, this emotional weight, like, okay, well, it's done, and I went back and I tried to reflect on that. And I remember thinking, well, obviously what that was just, I knew at least, for a while, there was, that fear of walking on eggshells of maybe getting that call and just, okay, well, thanks, we're done with you, and we wish you well, and you get future endeavors. So you always live in that fear of getting that call, and so at least I knew. I was like, well, all right, well, at least it's over, and I didn't get the call for that, but at least as a whole, the company is not. None of us are there anymore, and so yeah, there was, and that was kind of a mixed feelings, having that feeling, but I do remember that when it finally happened, I was still a little taken aback by, okay, wow, this is really happening, because there was a part of me that hoped that never would happen, but it did, and I certainly could see why, but and I certainly wish that WWE would have done a lot more with it, but I understand too. I mean, I understand why they didn't. And, yeah, it was, but I always look at, people always say too that, they, people have all kinds of, questions and comments of when you're talking to them about wrestling, especially during that era. And people always say, which is maybe something we can schedule to talk about more in the next time we get together is, about, the Glacier gimmick, like, I wish they would have pushed you more. I wish it would have been this, wish it would have been that. And listen, I don't really know of hardly any wrestlers out there that their path exactly the way they thought it was going to go. But the one thing is that, I'm always in, and I learned a lot of this from Paige. He really reinforced a lot of the, about, thinking positive, and, you can't always control what happens, but you can always control how you react to it. And, and it's just like, it didn't all work out like I thought it would, or hoped it would. But at the end of the day, here's what I know. Is, I was there during the greatest era of wrestling ever. And I was a part of arguably, maybe the best roster 100%. Of all time during that period. When you look at who was all there. And here's what I do know is, I held my own week after week after week after week after week, when, everybody was trying to get there. I mean, there was 1,000 people waiting to take anybody's spot. And I held my own, and not only held my own, I mean, I showed my worth, and I kept, doing stuff that I felt would be valuable to the company, so I would be of value to them. And that's what I'm really most proud of, is that, being a part of that group, this very, very special group of guys that, I had looked up to, before getting to that level. And all of a sudden now, I'm a part of that team that involves these guys. And I always say, the one thing that, and I can maybe, kind of leave it at this is, is that, and this sounds a little maybe a cliche, but it really is true, is, what I consider, and I've had a lot of great accomplishments in the wrestling business, a lot, and it's a long list, but what I consider the number one thing that was my greatest accomplishment ever is to be able to walk into that locker room with people who I genuinely admire and respect, and have that mutual respect from them, that I have a seat at that table and I've earned my spot. And that is by far what I'm most proud of as far as my contribution to wrestling, is that those people who I really look up to and respect, like I got that respect from them, and was, like I said, had a seat at that table, and that's pretty darn cool to be a kid from Brunswick, Georgia, who never really thought he'd be a wrestler. So yeah, and that's what I do at this point too. I'm very big on trying to. I realize how fortunate I've been. I've learned from some of the greatest names in this industry, and I feel a moral obligation to pass that on to the next generation, or to people that not even in the wrestling business, wrestling fans especially, or someone else who, maybe is just, looking for some inspiration to inspire them to do whatever they're doing, is, using what I learned from wrestling to at least, those life lessons, saying, hey, here's a lesson I learned doing what I love. take this and apply it to whatever you're doing.
That's
and hopefully it helps.
You can just tell how genuine of an answer that is. And it really, really, for me, because I loved like really getting inside somebody's mind and seeing their true feelings. And when you can really tell if somebody's full of shit or not. And I really felt a lot from that answer. And I really appreciate that. And you just given that insight. And that just, not that I had any question about this, but it really just says what kind of person you are. And I just really appreciate that answer that you gave coming from the heart. And,
well, thank you,
man. I just appreciate it. I really do. And it's nice to get some real insight, which you can see as real insight and not this shit that's just trying to get people to watch you or follow you. Like my goal when I talk to people is to really get how they really feel and tell me what they really feel and not what they think people want to hear. And I know you gave me all of that today, and I can't thank you enough for that, man.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Dylan, man. And I just want to say, this, it's the first time that we've had a chance to do this, but I know we and I talked for the first time on the phone, last week, and, mutual friend kind of brought us together and man, obviously I've done more podcasts than I can remember over the years, over the decades. And I just want to say, man, you're such a genuine person, which makes you a genuine host. And you do the one thing that I look for and that I crave whenever I do any kind of a interaction with anybody is just, you do two great things. You ask great questions and you listen great, which is, sometimes hard to do, but I mean, you're very natural at the questions you ask and they're not questions that I've gotten a million times, which is fine. I mean, I want to answer those questions too, because it may be for the first time someone is hearing my answer. So I always try to respect that, but just, this felt more like just a good old, sit down, a couple of guys having a great conversation about what they love, So, and that truly means a lot.
And
so
I
want to say thanks.
And I
that.
still do have a million questions, and they just flow to me as we flow, man, because I'm genuinely fucking interested in all of this, and I know everybody else is too. And I feel like everybody's got different things they want to hear and learn about, but I feel like as a true fan, I ask things that people want to hear and learn about, and everybody's got their opinion on it, and that's awesome. I always like to hear opinions. That's what it's all about. It's so, like, for instance, I'm a shoe collector, as you can see, and I always I like to hear. I don't care if you like what I like or don't. I want to hear why you like what you like, and I've bought in shoes that I thought I didn't like, and I saw somebody wear them or give me their opinion, and totally changed. Some people get offended by opinions. I get intrigued by opinions. It's how you learn.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, to me, that's what, makes us tick is, being intrigued by, one of the greatest things that, and I'd love to talk more about this next time we talk too, is, the older I get, the more I realize how truly fortunate I was to grow up with just two really, really great parents. And they were in law enforcement, and we didn't have a lot of money, but there was a lot of love in our house. And, and my dad was someone who achieved a lot of notoriety and where they both were with the Georgia State Patrol. But, my dad was one of those guys, like, he was a great leader. He led by example, and he was just someone that people really enjoyed being around. And I remember when I was in college, I didn't ask him this until college. And because I remember in high school, we started a booster club for football. The parents voted my dad president of the booster club. I'm not even sure if he wanted to be the president, but they just kind of voted him the president, And then, when I got to Valdosta State, they were just starting their program. Everybody got together and they voted my dad the president of that booster club. And once again, I'm not even sure if he wanted that, but, he probably took it. But, the thing is, at one point, I remember asking my dad one time, I was like, and I always call him Pop. I was like, Pop, I see how you deal with people. And I think it's something I did get kind of honestly from him, but I said, like, if you had to, like, give me one good answer, like, say, what is it that you think, makes you that, approachable? People's, their defenses kind of come down when they talk to you or whatever. And I just remember what he said. He just looked right at me and he just, his son, he goes, because I just get genuinely interested in people. When I'm talking to somebody, I just get genuinely interested in talking to them and listening to them. And he said, I don't think a lot of people seem to do that, and he said, just be genuinely interested in people. And I think that just says a lot about who you are, and it opens up a lot of doors for conversation of things you probably never thought you'd be talking about with somebody. But I think sometimes too, just people want to be heard. We all do, and but yeah, I was very fortunate to have really good parents, and who were very hard on me and my twin brother at times. So I want to be clear about that. But and then having my two martial arts instructors who are still alive to this day, and I'm seeing one of my instructors. I'm going back to Georgia, Florida weekend. We're going back home, and and my instructors are in their early 80s now, and I still wouldn't want to tangle with either one of them. But and my high school coach I plan on seeing him. He's there, and just some of those mentors that I had that really made a huge impact, which I knew they were then. But the older I get, I realize, man, boy, they really put me on a great path, And,
absolutely,
and
that's awesome. And like I had that too. My dad unfortunately passed away in 2015, but I grew up. I'm an only child, and my parents were married, the whole time, and I had a really good home and everything was taught well, and that's kind of why I have more of an older school mentality, and everybody's different, and that's cool. But I think you and I share a lot of the same values and morals and kind of same type of upbringing and surroundings. So it's very cool to relate. And, it's like you brought up too. And one of the things I'm learning through my prayer is like to become a better listener. It's like we talk, but it's not just me. It's me and you. Listen, learn, feed off each other, go back and forth. And a lot of people, they'll talk a lot, but then it's just, when you talk back to them, you can tell they're not listening, and it sucks. And it's not a real conversation. So one of the things I try to pride myself on in what I do is I'm here to interview you. Of course I want to give you my opinions, but I'm not here to talk about Dylan. Like today, I'm here to talk about Ray and Ernest and, so on and so forth. I want to learn about you. I want to give you some of my thoughts, but I'm here to learn about you, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. And like I said in the process too, I've learned a lot about you already, which I think is great. I'm so impressed by, when you told me last week we were talking about how you and your son work together. I just think that's awesome because, I just in that one statement just said a lot to me about the relationship that you have with your son. And I had that with my dad, my brother and I both, and we had it with both our parents. But, it's just you don't hear that a lot these days, as kids grow up, they kind of go off and do their own thing, and a lot of times they're not involved in anything the parents have going on. And I think that's really cool, man. Really cool.
An Italian family, and everything is like family. And so I try to, I feel like we waste a lot of time, and I've done it, unfortunately, and without realizing it, that you're throwing time is not on your side, no matter what you do. And the more you waste and the less you realize, you wake up one day and it's like, what the fuck just happened here? And I don't want that, Yeah, and I've done that enough now where it's like I'm not doing that anymore, And I'm a worker and I'm consumed with work, but at the same time, it's like, okay, step back and realize, like, hey, you got to do this too, So, we learn as we grow.
Yeah, and yeah, we do. Yeah, and that's what's great about it. I mean, like I said, I'm excited about that we got to do this, and it's great that we got Ernest on, but I'm excited about us talking about a lot more because I know we have so many mutual interests and passions, and let's just face it, we could stop at wrestling, and we probably have something to talk about forever. but I know we have so much more, my thing about wrestling is that, growing up a fan, lifelong fan, ever since I was a kid, to have the life that I've had, I never anticipated. I never thought I'd become a professional wrestler. Not that I didn't want to. I just never saw that as being something I'd be good enough to do, and or something that I would, that anybody would want to see me do or pay to see me do. And so, I have another, and this, I'm one of those people, and I'm sure you do too. I have a lot of quotes that just, have been great teachable moments for me. And one of the ones that I use when I do seminars and with our, 12-week camps we did with our wrestling school, one of the things I always say is, do what you love, and what you love will reward you. in ways that you won't even imagine, And, one of the greatest things that came from me wrestling and becoming a part of WCW was, and this is something Dallas and I got to do. And I certainly would love to get into this story in more details. We did a sports memorabilia convention in '97, and we got to spend 3 days like behind the scenes, making appearances right side by side with Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
And this was, and this was like the year after he lit the torch in Atlanta for the Olympics. And here I am, and I've got some of the greatest pictures in the world with Muhammad Ali, and then getting to know him over those 3 days. And I'm thinking, I remember at one point thinking here I am, Brunswick, Georgia, and I'm sitting here, and I'm just sitting in the back having a conversation with Muhammad Ali. It's just, it just blew my mind. But once again, it's like, how did all this happen? It happened because I pursued something I loved, and this door got opened because, of nothing more than me just pursuing something I loved. So things like that, those unexpected, things you get out of it are just, and I know you pursuing, fitness, that I'm sure there's been doors that have opened and people you have met that you had no idea you would ever meet.
Right now, look right
now, and it's just like, right. Yeah. And which I just love that. I love that the universe has a way of bringing people together and giving you those great experiences just because you're pursuing what you were meant to pursue, whatever that is, and like you said, and it opens up doors for new friendships. And
I tell you right now, I've already got a ton of ideas for us, I think. And hopefully we've got some projects to work on later, which we'll talk about. But I think for instance, we'll do a watch along on the Bash at the Beach, match that you had, and we'll get into it and we'll talk. I've got a million ideas I'm going to run by you. It's going to be fun. So, first, let me just say, as I've said when we started, I can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, your willingness to do this, and your willingness to talk about things, and be honest about them, because that's awesome. What I would like you to do, because I really want people to follow you and really check into the things that you do. So tell everybody the best places to follow you, and also give out the movie website again, which I'll also link, but give all that info out for everybody to kind of follow you and get to know you more.
Okay. That's one of the things you could probably help me with too. is increasing my presence on social media, because I haven't really done a lot of that, last couple of years. But on Facebook, it's just Ray Lloyd. I do have a fan page, which is Glacier Ray Lloyd. I'm on Instagram, just as Glacier Ray Lloyd. Pretty much on any of the social media, you can find me as Glacier Ray Lloyd. And as far as the film, once again, it's the Unbreakable Bunch movie.com. And and you'll see there's tons of behind the scenes pictures that we took. And just to give you a quick rundown of who's all in the film. Like I said, the greatest thing about that project to me was every single person we asked to be a part of the film, it was almost an immediate yes, and which, that in itself was just, mind blowing to me. But the all-star cast of wrestlers, if you're a wrestling fan, I promise you're going to love this film. And here's the great thing about the film too, Dylan, is, and I'm going to tell people right now, we intentionally made a movie. We had one sole investor who's been awesome, gave us a good, decent budget to make this movie. But we made this movie in the spirit of 1980s, kind of, B movie action adventure style movie. So, like when you see the alien in the movie, that's, that's the alien presence, which is early in the movie, it's, think 80s, and to have fun with it. You're not going to see, we didn't have a budget to do over the top, visual effects like Marvel movies, but that was intentional. So but a lot of the visual effects we do have in the movie are great. There's gunfire, there's explosions. All the aliens have glowing green eyes. So, we certainly, I think the movie does hold up. But if you're a fan of those 80s B movies, style action adventure sci-fi films, I always say the action, the action in our movies always say is like A-Team style action, but the all-star cast as far as the wrestlers, like I said, you got, Tonga Fafita, you got the living legend Larry Zbyszko, like I said, Luther and I, we're two of the main characters. Diamond Dallas Page has a great role. Stan Hansen, who's a fellow Hall of Famer. Gangrel, David Heath, and there's some other surprise wrestling, cameos. I don't want to give all of those away, but we also here in Orlando, where I live, Pinklin Thomas, who was 2-time world heavyweight boxing champ. He lives right here, and we had him do a cameo in the movie where he plays the kind of the grand marshal of the festival that's going on in this small town where this alien presence is, and where we happen to stop off. So, there's a lot of great little, cameos in the movie. But if you're a wrestling fan, I think you'll love to see who's all in the movie. I think their acting holds up with and we have some great actors in this movie. The guy who plays the kind of, slimy promoter character is actually a guy named Adam Minarovich. And if anybody's a fan of The Walking Dead, you'll remember Adam, the first 2 seasons, he played Carol's abusive husband. And the first 2 seasons, and he ends up, I think if he gets in the fight with, what's his name? And the aliens the zombies eventually get him. But you get to see a guy and he has great comedic timing. And so you get to see a guy who's known for a character that people really hate. In this movie, he's still kind of, the Weasley little promoter, but he's got great comedic timing, and you get to see that in this movie. Our female lead is Julia Denton, who's an amazing actress, who's worked alongside of Jennifer Aniston, Paul Rudd. I mean, she's an amazing actress. Like I said, Nicholas Logan. There's an AMC series on right now called Dark Winds. He's on this whole season of Dark Winds. I mean, so Mark Ashworth, who plays the crazy guy in the town, who's the conspiracy theorist that everybody thinks he's crazy, but he's actually the one that knows what's going on. There's a remake of The Magnificent Seven just a few years ago with Denzel and Chris Pratt, and just an amazing cast. And the guy who plays the role of Preacher in that movie is Mark Ashworth, who is in our film. So we've got some really great actors in this film that alongside the wrestlers. I mean, like I said, the rising tide lifts all the boats. So it's a very good cast. I feel like it's a very good story. It's a fun story. This is one of the things that I really want to hammer home. It's a very family-friendly film. We wanted to make a movie where there was, really, basically no profanity, no over-the-top gross humor, stuff like that. And listen, I know there's a lot of films that have that, and that's no big deal. But I just figure, as a family, a lot of people grew up watching wrestling as a family. I wanted to be able to enjoy a movie about wrestling where everybody can sit down on a Saturday night and watch this movie. And I remember our editor, who, when he first edited the first take on the film, first of all, it was 2.5 hours long, and we were like, all right, we got to cut an hour down on this movie. But he said, I'll never forget him calling me up, and he said, man, Ray, he said, you know what? He said, boy, this really plays like a good old Saturday night beer and pizza movie. And I said, great. That's what we're going for, just a good fun ride, and it's, and all the characters are strong characters. They're fun characters. There's a lot of, peaks and valleys in the story. There's a lot of layers of the wrestlers that are personal layers that I don't think people are going to expect to see. We really worked really hard on the story so that it doesn't come across like we just threw some story together as an excuse to get a bunch of wrestlers in a movie. So, and we can talk more about that later too. I don't want to harp on too long today, because I know we've gone for a while.
You want to give out Ernest's info before we go to his social media stuff, if you have it?
Yeah. As far as Ernest, you can find and follow Ernest, pretty much Ernest the Cat Miller. Whatever you look for, he's on Instagram and Facebook and everything. He's pretty much, if you look for Ernest the Cat Miller, you'll see all of his stuff. Yeah, and please follow Cat. He's awesome. He puts some very entertaining
that
stuff
at all. So awesome. Well, Ray, like I said, absolute pleasure to have you here. We're definitely going to do it again. So everybody, make sure that you follow Ray, follow Ernest, check out the movie, and stay tuned for plenty more to come. Dylan Gemelli signing off.